Hey, folks. Sorry about the challenges there, but we got past it. We'll move forward. Welcome to the session, Confessions of a Metaconsultant. I guess the first thing I should explain quickly is what the heck is a Metaconsultant. This is a term that I coined myself about 6 years ago when I realized that I had spent the majority of my career working with people who consult. So I consulted to people who consult, hence this idea of meta consulting. And that spurred a bunch of thinking in my mind, is that there were some ideas about consulting that I should share with the greater consulting community. So that's the purpose of this session, is to share a couple of those. There are many more, but just to talk through some of these things that I think are really important that all consultants know about the art and practice of consulting. So let's go jump right in here, and I want to go talk about my first slide, which is the first meta consulting idea, and this is from a guy by the name of Peter Block. If any of you have had the great opportunity to read Peter Block, congratulations. If you haven't, highly recommend anything by Peter Block. There's like this much or more of it. His literature on the art and practice of consulting is just fantastic. His one book called Flawless Consulting is in 4 editions, and I have all 4 of them back there. But this particular concept is from a book of his called The Answer to How is Yes. The answer to how is yes. And I love this idea. It's simply this, that the majority of time in business is spent talking about 6 questions, and only 6 questions. And they are the questions that are on the left-hand side of this slide. How do you do it? How long will it take? How much does it cost? How do you get those people to change? How do you measure it? And how have other people done it successfully? And I began to think about this and realize that he's absolutely correct, that most of the conversations that we tend to have revolve around these 6 things. And now, certainly, these are stated generally. So the pronouns change, right? The it changes. What is it? Well, that'll change from industry to industry, from company to company, from organization to organization. The pronouns, the you changes. Who are the people who are involved in this? So that certainly does change, but the nature of the question doesn't. And that's what I found so fascinating. And his warning to us is not that these are bad questions in and of themselves. In fact, they're practical questions. They're good questions. People who ask these questions in meetings are perceived to be smart, right? He said the problem with these questions is that they are too often asked and answered. And those 2 things are important: asked and answered too early in the process. And that these questions, that when they are asked and answered too early in the process, tend to stifle innovation and creativity and our ability to really address the problem. He also calls these how-based questions our natural defense mechanisms against change. So if we want to resist a change, what we'll do is somebody stands up in a meeting and says, I propose that we do X, whatever X is, make some change. If we don't want to make that change, or if our objection to that change, we will pepper the proposer of those questions with these how questions. Oh yeah, how long is that going to take? And just think about this for a second. When somebody asks you, how long is it going to take? You probably have something in your mind and you're thinking, all right, well, maybe it's going to take 3 months, but it doesn't matter, because regardless of what you respond, the person can object, right? So you can say, well, I think it's going to take 3 months. They can say, oh, we don't have 3 months. We got to fix it way sooner than that. Or there's no possible way we could fix that in 3 months. It's going to take us at least 6. So they're setting you up for the conversation, because unless you answer exactly what they were thinking, which they weren't, by the way, they didn't have anything in mind. We're setting up the objection. So as a result, what we tend to do is then we say, okay, we'll start to give ranges. We'll say 3 to 6 months. Well, it doesn't matter, because they can still object. Hey, we don't have 3 months, or we don't have 6, or 6 months is too short. So it doesn't matter what your response is. So even if you ever increase the range of the response, there will still be objection to it. And So what we're learning there is that if we want to shoot down something, we go immediately to the practical. And nowhere is this more seen than in the question, how have others done it successfully? And this is, if you think about it, really, we'll call it the reference question. This is people want a reference, right? They want to, well, so give me an example of where somebody else has done this. I want an example of a $6 million plastics manufacturer within a 75-mile radius of Oshkosh. And then you do the research on it, and you find out they're the only plastics manufacturer in a 75-mile radius. So it's self-referential. But they want to know, how have others done it successful? Well, here's something for you. What if this exact thing hasn't been done? Does that mean we dismiss it? I mean, picture the Wright brothers asking each other this question on the way from Dayton, Ohio to Kitty Hawk, right? You know, well, Wilbur, how have other people done this, powered man flight thing successful? Well, Orville, I've been doing some research at the Dayton Library, and I found out that, there was this guy Icarus and wax and wings crash. That was not good. Leonardo da Vinci, the greatest human mind ever, designed no less than 6 flying machines, none of which get off the ground. You're right. The hell with it, Wilbur. Let's go back to the bicycle shop. Right? So they didn't ask that question. They asked the question that are listed on the right-hand side of the slide, which Block calls the yes questions. What do we want to create together? In other words, that is the scope question, isn't it? What do we want to create together is the scope question. And that question has to be answered first in its entirety before we answer 2 other important questions that are usually asked, which is, how long is it going to take? And how much is it going to cost? So they want the answers to those 2 questions because those are the practical questions. They want immediacy around those 2 questions, but they don't want to answer the real question or talk about the real question, which is, what is it that we want to create together? And then once we understand that, then we can come back with the timeline and price. And then we also have to ask these other questions. What is this worth it to you? Is the value beyond what you're going to pay? And those are the questions that we need to ask first. So this is a meta idea, and I've got a half hour today, and I've blown 10 minutes. Not blown. This is important stuff. 10 minutes on this stuff already. But I could do an hour or more just on this slide, but I won't because we have other things to cover. But I strongly encourage you to think about this. Start to become attuned to how-based questions. When people ask them, start to perk up your ears a little bit and say, all right, is it an appropriate time for this question? Have we fully answered the what matters or yes questions, as Block calls them? Have we answered those fully? And if so, then we can go back and answer the practical questions. So there we have it. Okay. So the next thing, a meta idea that I want to share with you is something that you would think was very simple, which is let's define what a consultant is. And this is the definition that working definition. I'm subject to open to possibly making adjustments to this, but I'm going to call a consultant a person who is in a position who has some influence over an individual, group, or organization, but has no direct authority to make decisions. In other words, the consultant's role is not of decision making. It's actually of coming up with finding what's going on, giving the decider some options, maybe even making a recommendation to the decider, but the decider then makes the decision. It's this arm's length transaction. So that's a consultant. Now, there is a position that I'll call this surrogate manager, and I'm open to change on that because I don't know if I like the word, but this is a person who acts on behalf of or in place of a manager. In other words, sometimes we may get hired to make decisions on behalf of an organization. Now, I got no problem with either of these. I'm not morally opposed to one or the other, but I do think that these are 2 different roles. And it is extraordinarily important for us if we are consultants to understand our role as consultant is not to make decisions and to make sure that we're pushing those decisions back to the customer. Even the small micro decisions as to, whether to check a particular box and set up somewhere, that needs to be ultimately decided by the customer as long as we explain what the ramifications of checking or unchecking that box is, right? So that's our role, but it's their decision. And we want to stay, I think, in consulting world as long as we possibly can. Now, again, I don't have a moral objection to this surrogate manager where you are being asked to make decisions on behalf of the customer. But I will say this, that these are two distinct roles, that you can't be both at the same time for the same customer. And one is a much higher risk, and that is surrogate manager. So if that's the case, it has to be priced appropriately, and there needs to be a change in the pricing structure for that engagement, because now we're making decisions on behalf of people, the whole different thing, right? So we have to be very careful here about that. I do want to mention this, that I'm just going to quick jump in here and check the chat to see if anybody has any questions. I probably should have been doing that. Okay, so if you do have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I've got the chat up. Yes, great to see you guys as well. All right. So let me move on to the next meta idea, which is one around trying to understand what is it that our customers are looking for. And this question is, I think, should be asked early on in the prospect. When you're prospecting, when you've got somebody who you consider a prospect, is to try to understand one of the following: which of these three best describes the type of relationship you would like with us? Best describes. Do you want a subject matter expert? Do you want an extra pair of hands? Or do you want a collaborative partner? And again, no moral judgment against either of these, or any of these. I think all three are magnificent roles. But I think that there may be a target that we're looking for, and I'll call this not a demographic, but a psychographic, that we should be targeting particular people who want one more than the other, based on how we want to behave as consultants. Which of these roles do we feel most comfortable in? And it's just from a market perspective, I want to target that and to get some understanding of that. And Joseph, thank you for the question. Are these mutually exclusive? These are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I love it when you're 30 seconds ahead of me. I would even say, okay, bring this to a prospect and say, all right, where on this triangle inside this triangle would we be? Like, if you put a dot in the place where you think we most are likely to have the most success in your organization. Now, good, glad you like that. I've worked with some organizations that have decided that they will only work with folks who say are very close or solid on the C, collaborative partner role, or they're not going to work with that organization. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to do that. I'm just saying that is a strategy, that is a strategic decision that you personally or your organization can make with regard to I feel most comfortable in the role where I am. And one of the other ways that I think that you can use this is retrospectively, right? Bring up your current customer list. Bring up your current customer list and go through and say, all right, our customers are where are they in this? This customer considers us a subject matter expert. Okay, this customer considers us a pair of hands. This customer considers, and again, Joseph, to your point, mostly best describes, right? Best describes the nature of the relationship of where each of your current customers are on this. And then see if you can find some commonalities, right? Like look then and say, all right, well, the customers that consider us an extra pair of hands, they are the most dissatisfied with us. Or maybe they're the most satisfied. Doesn't matter. Whatever that is, see if you can find some commonalities of those customers that consider you each of these things. And then perhaps this can be now feedback into your target market. And you can start using language that would attract more people so that you would be in the most comfortable role for you and your organization that where you think you can best help people. So that's another I think a really good idea. I love this idea. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to play with this. So anyway, let's talk about the next meta idea that I want to share with you is what I'm going to call the overarching consulting assumptions of every engagement. Now, I know that there are particular assumptions that are true within an engagement, but what I'm going to say is that these assumptions are true of the relationship, and they are true of all engagements because they are true of the very nature of what it means to be a consultant. And now when I'm using consultant, by the way, I am out of surrogate manager land and saying we are in this position of have some influence over an individual, group, or organization, but no direct authority to make decisions. Okay, so that's where we are. So these are the three overarching standard, whatever you want to call them, consulting assumptions that are true of the relationship of every consulting engagement. First, problem solving requires valid data. If you want us to help you solve a problem, we need valid data about the problem. Now, yes, this can be data in the system, in the cloud, on a hard drive, wherever it happens to reside nowadays, right? Wherever that is, that it can be that data. It can be data in a spreadsheet, but it also can just be soft data. It can be a situational awareness. It can be that we've got 3 people in our operations team that are very anti-technology or anti-AI or something. That's data as well, right? It's soft data. But if you want us to help you solve a problem, we need data, valid data about the problem. Meaning you can't withhold stuff from us. Because I've heard this. I've heard people that you start inquiry with a particular customer or even prospect to start asking them questions, and they're like, "Well, we can. That's proprietary. We can't really can't." Well, I can't help you. It'd be like going to a doctor and saying, "I need triple bypass surgery. Just give it to me." The doctor's like, "Well, can I take your blood pressure first?" Just to say, "Well, that's personal. I don't want to give you that information." It's like, doesn't make any sense, right? Does not make any sense. All right, so that's the first consulting assumption. The second consulting assumption is that decision-making requires free choice. So this again, now this is the customer making the decision, since they're the ones who are making decisions. It requires that they have free choice. In other words, they have to be able to say no to you. And you want to say, no is always on the table. No is always an option. Stop is always an option. And in consulting, by the way, silence is never consent. Silence is never consent in consulting. We want to make sure that we always have full, unabashed consent, a decision that is either a yes or no. They're free to say no. They're free to say we don't want to do that, and that's fine. But we want to make sure that we confirm it. The other thing that's important about this is the inverse, right? If they can't say no, their yes means nothing. If you can't say no, your yes means nothing, because then it's just acquiescence. So we've got to make that's another reason why no has to be on the table. The third overarching consulting assumption is that effective implementation requires customer commitment. And I just want to describe that there's a difference between commitment and support. And oftentimes I see a whole lot of support from customers, but not full commitment. And the way I like to describe it is that the difference between commitment and support is like bacon and eggs for breakfast, right? The chicken is supportive, the pig is committed. It's like, so skin in the game, right? We're thinking skin in the game here. And we want to make sure that they are fully committed to this. So one of the ways that you will hear the verbal expression of support but not commitment is in the phrase, "I don't disagree with you." Yeah, I mean, if I had a quarter for every time I heard that, I would be retired, right? I don't disagree with you. So my response is almost always, so does that mean you agree with me? And the answer is no, it does not mean they agree with you. It means They don't disagree with you now, but reserve the right to call you an idiot in 2 weeks. And we have to be very careful of that phrase. I don't disagree with that. That is a sure sign that you have support, at least temporary, but not full commitment to things. So we want to make sure that we have this. Now, I want you to notice that the operative word in all of these is require. It's not would be nice to have if, sort of, kinda. It's these are requirements. Problem solving requires valid data. Decision making requires free choice, and effective implementation requires customer commitment. The reason why I bring these up, and they go hand in hand with the next topic I'm going to talk about, which is overarching consulting goals, is that I think that it is extraordinarily important to make these assumptions known as early as possible in the relationship, to let them know that these are in play. We need you, both we and the customer, or prospective customer even, needs to understand that these three things are true. And they are assumptions, but we assume them to be true. And if either you, Mr. or Miss Prospect Customer, or we have any sense that this is breaking down in some way, we have the obligation to bring that up and talk about it with somebody. So if you ever feel, Mr. or Miss Customer, that you do not have the ability to say no to something, please let us know. It's your obligation to let us know. We will do everything we can to always put no, stop on the table as a choice. But if at some point we don't do that, you please remind us, because that is your obligation, because we have agreed to these assumptions. Okay, so next up is the overarching consulting goals, and there are 4 of these. We'll take them through in turn. This should take us right to the end of our presentation today. So again, like the consulting assumptions, these are true of all consulting relationships, right? All consulting relationships. These are true. And the first one is our goal is to solve problems so that they stay solved for as long as possible. And that's in parentheses for a reason, because one of the laws of systems thinking is that today's problems come from yesterday's solutions. So in all cases, over time, every solution at some point becomes a problem. It's just the nature of the beast, right? So by definition, something is in place today, 15 years from now, it will be a problem. So for example, if you walk into an organization and they're running their organization on 15 Excel spreadsheets that don't talk to one another, that's a problem. However, every one of those spreadsheets at one point in the past was a solution to a particular problem, right? So you see how this works. But so our goal is to solve problems so that they stay solved for as long as possible. And we're always going to put that time frame in there, that we're not just looking for a temporary fix. We're looking for long-term. Now, we may have to put a temporary fix in place and then we can come back in with a longer-term solution. But we're always going to be trying to keep this idea of solving this problem for as long as possible in mind. So that's our goal. Next, we want to establish a collaborative relationship, collaborative, work together. This is not about we, they. This is about us coming together as two organizations or two individuals to create a more effective relationship, to establish that collaborative relationship and work together with one another. Next up, we want to ensure that attention is given both to the technical problem and the emotional well-being of the customer. This, to me, is the crux of the difference between consultants and technicians. This is not to bash technicians. Technicians are wonderful people. I love technicians. But technicians care almost exclusively about solving the technical problem. Whereas a consultant, yes, they care about solving the technical problem, but they also care about the emotional well-being of the person with whom they're working. And these things have to be in near equal proportion as best we can. Great quick example of this is you know that there if you ever have called technical support for people that say like my inventory valuation report is taking 4 hours to run, and the technician may say something like, "Is it right?" You're like, well, yes, it's right. The numbers are right, but it's taking 4 hours to. I don't see the problem. WAD, works as designed, right? So that is a technician, and you're like, well, but we need this in a more. Oh, well, that's okay. That is a different issue, right? That is a different issue. So that's a difference between a technician and a consultant, understanding that the person who's making the decision with this report needs this in a more steady, frequent manner in order to be able to make the most effective decisions. And then the last of the consulting goals is to develop customer commitment. Now, I just want to draw, not contrast, but harken back to the assumptions, which is effective implementation requires customer commitment. And here you're saying, Ed, what do you mean developing commitment here? Well, yes, because while we want to make sure it requires customer commitment, but we as consultants, part of our job is to continue to foster that commitment and make sure that we continuously have that commitment, because it's a natural part of the engagement experience for the confidence level of the customer to wane over time, mostly because we're asking them to do perhaps more and more work, or work that is different from what they're used to, at least on a temporary basis. So it is natural for them, for their commitment to begin to falter in different areas. And it is our job to make sure that we bolster that commitment as much as we possibly can, for as long as we possibly can. One quick note before I wrap up, and I know I've only got a minute left here, is that I just do want to draw a distinction between goals and objectives. The objectives can be of the engagement, right? Remember, these are goals of the relationship, but there is a difference even within an engagement of goals. Goals are that to which we aspire, but might not happen. And objectives are the things that are Boolean. They're yes or no. We're going to do them. We can check them off. So I make sure that you, in your mind anyway, you're separating this idea of goals, that to which we aspire, but might not happen. We aspire. And then objectives, the things that we check off and make sure that they are done. So with that, I want to quick wrap up. Thank you. Love having, this is my 3rd year in a row presenting at AcuCONNECT. Thank you so much to Amy and the other organizers of the conference, Darcy and team. Just if you want to get a hold of me or want to take a look up at the stuff that I have, metaconsultingacademy.com. Love to have you as part of the community over there, or send me an email, ed.kless@choosegreat.com, CHOOSEGREAT.com. All right, Johnny, thank you. Thanks, Liz.